Welcome to this talk. This is going to be a pre-say of the rather long interview, but very interesting interview I did with Dr. Tess, Lawrie. And this is kind of a condensed version of it for those who haven't got the time. So I'm just going to romp through the main points now. So interview with Dr. Tess, Lawrie. She's a medical doctor. She's a doctor of philosophy. She's a research specialist and understands research remarkably well. Now, the first video we did was on the importance of evidence-based practice and the way that she synthesises evidence. So we talked about that for quite a while. Watch the video if you want to see it. In the second video, of course, we focused on ivermectin. Now, she heard about the publicity around ivermectin around Christmas and New Year time. And because she's got expertise in this field, she decided to have a look at it. She didn't get paid for it. The information she looked at came from the Frontline COVID Critical Care Alliance, and she heard the Senate, was the American Senate hearing with Dr. Pierre Kory that aroused her interest. She's got a background and expertise for analysis and synthesizing lots of different information. So she takes different studies, puts it all together, and comes out with a bigger picture to derive that which is most likely to be correct. We did stress on the video, as I always stress, never take any medication as a result of what I say or anyone on my videos says. Only take things if your own doctor tells you to take them. This is for educational purposes only. Right, so Dr. Lawrie was impressed with the body of evidence from the Frontline Critical Care COVID Alliance. Now, we talked about plausible mechanisms of action for ivermectin. And there are several plausible mechanisms of action. So, for example, if we're talking about a homeopathic treatment, there's no plausible mechanism of action. It can't work. It's that simple. So is there a plausible mechanism of action whereby ivermectin could be antiviral, whereby ivermectin could be anti-inflammatory? Yes, on both counts was her answers. So several plausible mechanisms for ivermectin action, antiviral and anti-inflammatory effects. Prevents the life cycle of the virus and prevents viral replication. There is evidence for that, and reduces inflammatory markers. In other words, the way that the body reacts to inflammation. There seems to be less inflammation when people take ivermectin. We don't quite know whether that's reducing the amount of viruses, so there's less virus around to reduce the inflammation, or whether it's a direct anti-inflammatory. Probably a bit of both potentially. But I'm not sure about that. Some studies show ivermectin reduces viral load. So this is from Dr. Lawrie again. Studies show possible action against yellow fever, dengue, zika, and others. Now, these are the most appalling viral infections. You might remember Zika caused these terrible poor children with small heads, microcephaly, a few years ago. Yellow fever, dengue fever, massive problem, huge problem. Loads of people get dengue in Cambodia, for example, where I was working. They're so sick. So could this work against other viral infections? Potentially. Studies are needed to address that, but potentially, yes. And she did say potentially working against DNA and RNA, ribonucleic acid viruses like SARS coronavirus 2. So she wants more studies to explore the effects on other viral illness, which makes perfect sense. Now, practical empirical evidence for ivermectin working against SARS coronavirus 2 COVID-19. Preventing deaths and preventing infections, both possible. Now, she did a study including randomized controlled trials and the better quality observational studies. And she came out with 83% reduction in death rates. Now, if you watch the video, you'll see all this. She has specialised software where she puts all this information on from all the different trials, and the software works out what the overall effect is. This is basically like re-crunching the data. You take all the data from all these trials, you put it into this meta-analysis software, and it reanalyzes essentially all the data from all of the trials. So instead of having 10 little trials, it's a bit like having one big trial. Not quite as simple as that, but basically it's like that. And you collect all the data from around the world, which is what she specialises in, synthesise that into an answer. And that's what she got, 83% reduction in deaths. Wow, staggering, fall off your chair kind of number. 83% reduction in deaths. She appraised each study for the risk of bias. It's very clever. She talked directly to a lot of the authors. So Review Manager software, this would be a capital M. So Review Manager software was what she was using. This is used by the Cochrane people, and that's one of the standard sort of evidence-based sites in the world, really. Well, in the world, yes. So pulled study data, puts it all together, reanalyzes the data, took statistical help where it was necessary, got this result, 83% reduction in deaths, submitted it to Matt Hancock's office on the 4th of January and received no response. Strange. I mean, this is Dr. Tess Lawrie submitting this she's a leading expert, and yet. Anyway, she's going through the publication process now. She did point out that in pandemics or in emergency situations, and doctors are obligated to act quickly, which she did, but alas, not acted on as far as we know in the UK. Researchers have a moral duty to relay information as soon as possible, so that's why they did a preprint site, and that's why she relayed that. And she also made a video, but again, no political action in the UK from this. One has to wonder why there has been no, or is there? We don't know. She didn't get a reply. Now, so that was 83% with randomized controlled trials from around the world and good quality observational data. So many will say observational data poo-poo. I understand that. It's not that simple. She's an expert in this, and she did analyse all of the studies before she included them to get 83% protection against death. But even taking only randomised controlled trials, starting from scratch with a new review team of experts, peers to her, such as herself, great experts, 68% fewer deaths. So that's a much more conservative number. The real number could well be higher, but that's what she got when she only did a meta-analysis, crunching the data from the randomised controlled trials only. And she did stress she was using very strict criteria. So she was judging these studies really quite harshly, and yet still got 68% efficacy against death. Had she been judging the studies less harshly, of course that efficacy against death would have been higher. Impressive numbers. The software does what you call a forest plot. So this is risk ratio. So if the results over here, it favours the action of ivermectin. If the plot's over here, it favours the actin. The control is better. And without going through this in detail, we see that one's probably there, that one's probably there. If it's bang on the line, it means not the control or the placebo is better. If it's here, it means the placebo are better. If it's here, it means the ivermectin is better. That one was there. And of course, these lines are the uncertainties associated with the studies. If it's that one seems to be there, that one there, that one there, that one there. That one's got that range there. That one showed the placebo was better. That one's got a range there, but the middle was on the ivermectin side, and that one there. So we can see that the vast majority of these. So if you just looked at that study, there, you'd say, less people are dying in the control group than in the ivermectin group. Therefore, it doesn't work. But this is such clever thing. She looks at all of these studies, and the software computes the data from all of these studies, and still got 68% fewer deaths in the group treated with ivermectin, as opposed to the group given a placebo. And apparently this software, I'm going to download it and play with it as soon as I get the time. It's certainly still available. We're not sure whether you have to pay for it or not. So that was plotting deaths in treatment group and deaths in placebo group. Impressive results. Now, out of 100 deaths, ivermectin group, there was 27 deaths out of 1,000 people that were studied, and it was exactly 1,000 the way it worked out. So 26 people given ivermectin, 27 died out of 1,000. The placebo group, 82 died out of 903. That gives a 65% reduction in deaths via this other study, including more selected studies. And the p-value there is 0.002. That means there's 2 chances out of 1,000 that the result arose by chance. In other words, this is a massively significant result, and that's using the term significant in precise research terminology. Right, findings of randomized control trials were the same as observational studies. So this software can actually, it analysed a cohort of randomized controlled trials, and it analysed a cohort of good quality observational studies. And it found out that the results in both were highly comparable. So it looks like from that data, that indicates that the good quality observational studies are yielding data as accurate as the randomized controlled trials. Now that's kind of sacrilege in research speak, but one of the great, I'll tell you more later when we've got time, but Dr. Lawrie really opened my eyes to things about research that I didn't know. Do watch the whole video if you have time, it really is worth it. Now, ivermectin seems to be useful in all stages of the disease. Her meta-analysis showed there was an 88% reduction in infection rates, 88% efficacy in preventing infection, according to that data that she analysed. I mean, that is just staggering figure. And mild and moderate disease to reduce viral load, so disease worsening. So in mild and moderate disease, it reduced viral load, and it reduced viral load so the patient didn't get sicker. Right, she then kind of thought out loud, really, querying about long COVID. Will ivermectin work in long COVID? Now, I tend to be a bit cynical. I suspect it could do in some cases, but in many cases it probably won't because there might be already organ damage. But don't listen to me. My opinions are completely irrelevant. It's the data that matters. And she was saying there's data emerging from Argentina, and she thought Peru as well, indicating there might be some efficacy against long COVID. Placebo-controlled trial for 2 weeks would be a good option to start. So what she suggested was getting large numbers of people with long COVID, and we have, I think there's about 60 to 80,000 in the UK now. Put them on a placebo-controlled trial for 2 weeks. If it's shown that the ivermectin group does substantially better than the placebo, then you could stop the trial, give everyone who had the placebo the ivermectin, and they could get the benefit as well, is what she was suggesting. Hope you're still with it at this fast-paced study. Placebo-controlled treatment trial, not ethical. Now, what she's saying here is Dr. Lawrie is so convinced about the efficacy of ivermectin that she's thought it would actually be unethical to have a large randomized controlled trial where you would be giving people a sugar pill, even though the people conducting the trial, or she believes that giving ivermectin is going to reduce their chances of dying. So who would volunteer for the placebo group if they were given full information on that? So this was the limitations that she pointed out about randomized controlled trials, which was so interesting and enlightening, that they're not always possible for ethical reasons, because by definition there's a whole bunch of people in the control group that don't get the active intervention. 48% reduction in symptoms, that turned out at low certainty, but again she was being conservative, so it looks like symptoms are reduced by 48%. Now, I asked about the safety of this drug. What's the risk-benefit analysis? No point having a drug that's efficacious but dangerous. Her answer to that was that billions of doses have been given over the last 40 years. It's one of the World Health Organization's essential medicines list because it treats parasitic infections. Probably a third of the world's population have had ivermectin at some time or another. So when I'm talking about billions, this is not an exaggeration. Literally thousands of millions of people have had ivermectin. From that, over the past 40 years where we have data, there's been 4,600 adverse reactions to ivermectin and 16 deaths, which actually, although it sounds bad, is actually remarkably small. Remdesivir, for example, over the past year, there's been 417 deaths. So this is, no drug is ever safe. All drugs carry a risk. Every single active pharmaceutical agent that you'll ever take carries some degree of risk, but the risk with ivermectin is small and massively smaller than remdesivir, which is being used routinely in many parts of the UK. Studies have shown it's safe even if you give 10 times the dose. It comes in tablets, 3, 6 or 12 milligram tablets. The dose is 0.2 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, or the higher dose would be 0.4 milligrams per kilogram. That would be 200 micrograms per kilogram or 400 micrograms per kilogram. So if you want to work out what it would be for a hypothetical 85 kilogram person, you could do so. Oral tablets, the cost is $168 per kilo. I mean, we're talking, so that's 0.2 so you're talking about doses of like 20, 30 milligrams perhaps over a course. And there's 1,000 milligrams in a gram, and there's 1,000 grams in a kilogram. It's $168 per kilogram. I mean, in other words, to make this, it's very, very cheap. What this means is to put this into the tablets for the drug manufacturer to put this into tablets, put those tablets into packs, put them into boxes and distribute it would cost way more than the raw cost of the drug. It is remarkably cheap, and it's generic, it's off license. Pharmaceutical companies cannot make well, they can sell it for what they want if people buy it, but the point is anyone can make, any pharmaceutical manufacturer approved in their particular country is free to market this. There's no patent on it, there's no copyright on it, is what that means. So it's generic and freely available. World Health Organization, when they were selling it, 100 tablets, 100 12 milligram tablets. So for 100 12 milligram tablets, that's probably enough to treat, 30 or 40 people. That was $2.90. This is remarkably cheap. And of course, because it's remarkably cheap, and any reputable pharmaceutical manufacturer can make it, that means there's probably not a lot of profit in it. Not a lot, no big bucks to be made out of ivermectin because it's off copyright. Right, British Ivermectin something development. Anyway, this group, British Ivermectin Research Development Group that Dr. Lawrie's in, recommended for prevention and treatment in the UK, and they've told everyone, the World Health Organization, the Food and Drug Administration, anyone who's listened, everyone has been informed. So Dr. Lawrie's group has informed all of the major authorising bodies around the world, so it's up to them to find out what they're going to do about this. She did point out that something called the Helsinki Declaration means that doctors should give what they know to be effective. It's a moral duty that doctors should give what they know to be effective. Trouble is, most doctors don't have time to do all the research on their own. They have to go by government guidelines nearly all the time, and as of yet, the UK government guidelines have not changed. I was on and on about a randomized controlled trial. She said it would have to stop at the interim analysis, probably at about 1,000 patients, because she believed that way more people would be dying in the placebo group than in the intervention group, which actually got the ivermectin, and of course then it would be unethical to carry on the study. And she did point out that some of the studies she's been looking at from around the world, the studies were actually stopped because the clinicians running the trials considered it to be unethical to withhold what they considered to be a highly efficacious treatment from their patients to carry on giving them a placebo just to get more data. They considered it unethical to carry on, so she did point out a couple of trials that were stopped because of that. Now, protection from infection and workers. So this was contacts in families, healthcare workers. Is it going to prevent them from infection? That came up as well, looking at data later on. The ivermectin group, again, this is taking many different studies, putting it all together on a software, re-crunching it, reanalyzing it. And what she found out, when people were given ivermectin, there was 25 infections out of 1,397. So 25 got COVID from 1,397. That was the data that she collated. In the control group, 368 out of 883 got COVID. So again, prophylaxis, very impressive, cumulative, synthesized data here from Dr. Lawrie and her group. The software that the software is all shown on the video if you've got time to watch it. So 25 protected with ivermectin, out of 1,397 got the infection, 386 got the infection out of 833. That works out at a reduced risk of 93% reduction in infection rates. Even when one study that could have been argued about, she did talk to the author of the study, but you could still argue about the study. Although, anyway, even if you took it out, it was because it produced a bit of variance between the different studies, a bit of heterogeneity between the studies. So even if you took that one out, you've still got 87% protection against infection. So wow, 93%, 87% protection against infection is the data that she came up with. And I did talk about medical oil tankers, that it takes the medical establishment a long time to, shall we say, for the penny to drop, for practice to change. So that was the interview with Dr. Tess Lawrie, and that's that. This brief pre-say finished. So you can turn off now if you want, but if you want to hang around, I'm just going to give you a couple of personal reflections. I was remarkably impressed by the quality of the information that she was providing. I was impressed by the way that she picked up faults in my thinking and very gently corrected them. But I learned a lot about research and this idea of, we haven't got randomized controlled trials. And, firstly, it's not true. And secondly, as she said, it would be unethical to do that. And of course, pharmaceutical companies will probably not be chomping at the bit to do this because there's not a lot of money to be made from it. She did point out that a lot of the research that has been done by the clinicians themselves, clinician-funded research, as opposed to government-funded research, or as opposed to pharmaceutical company-funded research. She pointed out that some of the doctors concerned actually paid for the PCR tests themselves, and this, of course, was in addition to their day job. So what this really needs is for serious government attention around the world, FDA attention, WHO attention, regulatory body, European Medicines Agency attention. All of these bodies around the world need to look at this carefully, and Dr. Lawrie's data is available. It's in the public domain. You can download it. I'm going to put a load of links below this video, as I always do. Check it out for yourself. And what I would say is the evidence that Dr. Lawrie presented to me merits official government and international agency replies. If they don't reply, some might say if they don't reply that they're failing in a duty of care. They have to reply. Even if they reply and say, well, we think Dr. Laurie's got this wrong, even if they said that, then so be it. But the evidence that she gave me merits, in fact, I would say demands an official response. And we both got pretty excited about the idea of an antiviral medication. So thank you for that video, Dr. Lawrie. Thank you for the way that you increased my understanding of research and corrected my misunderstanding so gently. Watch the video. It's an hour well spent. It does get a bit technical in parts. That's why I did this. But there you go. Thank you for watching this Precis.